My name is Emily Robbins, and I chose industrial agriculture in the United States as a wicked problem because of the devastating disconnect it's created between people and their food. In our modern society, food magically appears on shelves for us to buy, but not enough people are asking the questions of how it was produced. Are the people producing it being treated fairly? And what are the environmental implications of our food production? We should be striving for an agricultural industry that's good for the economy, the people, and the environment.
Hello, my name is Reeve Laverty. I became interested in industrial agriculture a few years ago when I learned about some of the negative environmental impacts associated with these practices. Since then, I've just wanted to learn more about the solutions that can help us minimize harm to our natural ecosystems as well as reduce our overall land usage.
Hi, my name is Katerina Gaglione and I live in East Greenwich, Rhode Island. I am an environmental sustainability major and I chose the topic of industrial agriculture because it's really what got me into sustainability to begin with. I watched Food Inc. when I was, senior in high school, and it really just changed my perspective of how our entire industry of agriculture works in this country, and it really changed my lifestyle and how I choose to nourish my body based off of what I saw in the continuing research that I've done throughout the years. I truly believe that there is a better way to produce what we are producing and create healthier alternatives for the people of this country and for the world. So yeah, that's me, and that's why I chose this topic.
Hi, my name is James Stroud, and I am interested in the topic of industrial agriculture in the United States because without a sustainable source of food, Americans have come to rely too heavily on less sustainable methods of producing food and end up giving a massive amount of food waste. I believe that with new technologies and practices, we can improve the agriculture system present in the U.S. and help pave the way for a more sustainable future. First, I'll give you a little history behind the rise of industrial agriculture in the U.S. and some of the problems that have come with it. In 1862, the Homestead Act was passed, which granted 160 acres to individuals willing to develop the land for farming. At this time, approximately 50% of Americans lived on farms and 60% of jobs were in the agriculture industry. This was the golden era of private farms in the U.S. By the late 1800s, manufacturing had begun to economically eclipse agriculture, resulting in the loss of popularity of policies aimed at improving agriculture development. By the early 1900s, World War I brought about the creation of victory gardens in many people's backyards to help provide food for the war. By the 1920s, smaller farms had been almost completely replaced by profit-driven, corporately owned farms. World War II saw a resurgence in the victory gardens, and by 1944, these gardens supplied 40% of the vegetable needs of the U.S., but their popularity waned after the war. The Green Revolution occurred in the late 1950s and into the 1960s, resulting in a giant leap forward in agriculture productivity, especially on large-scale operations. During this time, there was also the rise of the hippie movement, and many young people began to move to smaller farms. Today, farming focuses on learning from mistakes of the past while being based on sustainability and a triple bottom line: people, profits, plants.
There are 7 major stakeholders as depicted in the Farm Bill legislative process provided by the USDA: government agencies, farm organizations, agribusiness, environmental groups, taxpayers, rural communities, and research scientists all contribute to the U.S. agricultural industry. While values and beliefs may vary, there are some consistencies between multiple groups. Government agencies believe that supporting industrial agriculture will secure and increase job markets, create food availability, and safeguard against domestic disasters. Farm organizations believe that fair wages, resource provisions, and structure and consistency in practices, standards, and markets will allow farmers to maintain their livelihood while providing goods for an exponentially growing population far exceeding their own. Agribusiness believes that by utilizing technology and artificial supplementation, farmers can grow larger quantities of food. The more innovative the technology, the more bountiful and resilient agriculture will be. Environmental groups believe that by providing alternative choices in farming practices and socioeconomic support, farmers will experience equity within their community and balance with the environment, thereby easing the pressures of economic demand. Taxpayers expect and assume the government is looking out for their best interest, but want to make sure that their dollars are going where intended and that there will be obvious results. Rural communities rely on each other, but also look to the government to assist in providing basic quality of life aspects to improve equity and the ability to continue production. Research scientists and the information they collect have no emotional or political bias. The results gathered should be used to make informed decisions about questions in regard to effective farming practices, social and environmental implications. In a perfect world, stakeholders' values should equate to a fair and balanced agricultural system. However, there have been many shortcomings in upholding these values, compounded by unbalanced stakeholder influence that have led to the degradation of U.S. agriculture. The federal government has had a hand in the agricultural sector since its infancy. Farm policy aims to create stability in market prices, as well as safeguard farmers against disasters such as drought or disease. This type of aid keeps farmers from going under during times of economic strife and quickly resume production in the wake of environmental stresses. While in theory federal aid makes sense, of course we don't want our food production to fail, but current government subsidies have become excessive and directly contribute to the increase in monocultural farming practices through biased distribution of funds. According to the USDA 2012 census, the federal government pays $20 billion in farm subsidies annually. Only about 39% of the 2.1 million farmers in the United States receive these subsidies. Further still, of that 39%, those producing corn, soybeans, wheat, cotton, and rice receive the most funds. There are 8 types of farm subsidies. The 3 largest types are insurance, agricultural risk coverage, or ARC, and price loss coverage, PLC. The latter 2 safeguard against low revenue and crop prices. 70% of payouts from these subsidy types are paid to farmers of corn, soybean, and wheat. Insurance is purchased on crops, just as you would purchase insurance on your home or car, but it is run by the USDA's Risk Management Agency rather than a private insurance company. 62% of farmers' crops insurance premiums are paid via taxpayer subsidy. Because farmers pay so little in premiums, they often make a profit on the claim payouts. Farmers not only make money by simply owning crop insurance, but can also apply to additional subsidy types, allowing them to double dip in subsidy payouts when revenue drops below a certain threshold. Farmers with the highest crop sales unabashedly receive the highest subsidy payouts. Large-scale farms and high-scale farms are predictably a direct correlation. Federal aid scandal has contributed to the disappearance of small-scale operations, but it is not the only factor. The Green Revolution and the rise of agribusiness saw the mechanization of farm equipment and the increased usage of fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides, all of which come with a hefty price tag. Large farms have outcompeted small-scale farming operations due to the substantial cost of modern farming practices. A study conducted by the UC Davis Macro Social Accounting Project in 1988 reported the largest farm operators in this region were able to exploit their natural, historical, and political advantages by combining government support programs, irrigation systems, foreign labor, and new technologies to become preeminent in the national and global agricultural economies. It is in exactly those areas where farming is the most modern, rational, and economically profitable that the worst general social conditions are found.
The positive and negative impacts of industrial agriculture. And starting with the positive impacts, those are increased exports, less manual labor, and cheaper food. This chart explains the value of agricultural exports in 2018, and that value was $139.6 billion. From 2009 to 2018, there was a 42% increase in agricultural exports in the U.S., and 1.1 million jobs were supported by agricultural exports. This first image shows the top countries in the U.S. exported to in 2018. Canada is in the number 1 position at around $20 billion. Mexico is in second at $19 billion. And the second image appearing shows the U.S. agricultural exported products of 2017. Soybeans are surpassing all products at 21.6 billion and corn at 9.1 billion. The second positive is less manual labor. This can be a negative or a positive. It's kind of a double-edged sword. But from the beginning, the workforce in agriculture consists of self-employed farm operators, family members, and hired manual labor. When the rise of productivity in agriculture began, so did the mechanization of farming, and this reduced the need for manual labor. In 1950, there were 7.60 million self-employed farm workers and 2.33 million hired laborers, and by the millennium, there were around 2 million self-employed workers and 1 million hired laborers. And this graph is just showing you the steady decline from 1950 to 2000. And this also supports cheaper food costs. Another positive thing. Because there are more mechanizations with farming, like we mentioned earlier, this helps with keeping costs low on produce products in the U.S. Fruits and vegetables range in cost for 40 to 80 cents per cup. This first graph is showing price per cup of fruits in 2016. Out of 62 fruits produced, 42 of them cost between 40 cents to $1.19 per cup. The chart next is showing you the same with vegetable prices. And this final chart just kind of goes down to the nitty-gritty and specifically shows you the price of the individual types of produce. And moving on to the negative impacts. Those are fertilizer runoffs and fossil fuel use. Agriculture is the leading cause of impaired rivers, lakes, oceans, and shores, according to the EPA. Water runoff typically carries salts, fertilizers, pesticides, nitrates, and pathogens, and this poses a risk to human and animal health, which then goes into fertilizer runoff, then goes into eutrophication, which is the response of aquatic ecosystems to the addition of excess nutrients that are a byproduct of human activities. So that is fertilizer runoffs. There is phosphorus and nitrogen in these fertilizer runoffs that are running off in the river, and it is creating algae blooms, but I'll explain a little bit of that in a minute. The impacts of eutrophication are algae blooms, dead zones, effects on fisheries, and impacts on human and animal health once again. The image here is showing the cycle of eutrophication. You can see the river runoff from the farmland here up in the corner, which then comes down and brings in extra nutrients from the soil into this river here. The nitrogen and phosphorus from the soil create plant growth, but also create growth of algae called algae blooms. And when the algae decomposes, it takes oxygen from the water, which then creates dead zones because fish and other animals need oxygen to survive. And finally, the last negative impact is fossil fuel use. Agriculture requires extensive use of non-reusable fossil fuels, and those are used in on-farm machinery, processing, packaging, and transportation. 17% of U.S. fossil fuel consumption is caused by agriculture, and it contributes to a highly inefficient food system. So for every 1 unit of food, it uses 7.3 units of fossil fuel energy to make that not only be planted, processed, packaged, and transported. Every part of that just 1 unit of food takes 7.3 units of fossil fuel energy. Food miles are distance food travels from production to consumer. So if you're buying locally, you have less fuel miles. If you are buying a traditionally grown food from a supermarket, say as Stop and Shop, that's where we are in my area. That's what we have in my area. You would be getting your food probably from somewhere in Middle America, and that food will then take days to weeks to get to you and cause more food miles and more fuel usage. With an increase of food production comes an increase of food miles. I've found this map where you can find food deserts. So food deserts are where low income or low access places to supermarkets or just markets in general to access produce and healthier foods. There's not a lot of it around. So I thought this was a really cool website to look into. So this is a map of food deserts, which, like I just said, are where low income and low access food occurs. I'm from Rhode Island, and Rhode Island is the smallest state in the nation, so it's really a great example to capture a whole state outlook. So this is the state of Rhode Island. You can see in Providence, there is a high density of low income and low access, and this is very true. As of a few months ago, there was no markets to be found in those areas, and Providence just recently opened a food co-op in that area to eliminate that food desert issue and also create a more affordable, healthy shopping for these people in these low income areas, and build up a better relationship with local farms in this way.
Current industrial agricultural practices in the United States are harming people and our natural ecosystems. The drivers of this problem are pollution, habitat loss, resource depletion, and antibiotics. Agriculture produces many different pollutants. Fertilizer pollute water sources in the form of runoff. The unnatural excess of nutrients can promote algae overgrowth to the point that hypoxic or low oxygen zones form. Fertilizer runoff from the Mississippi River creates a hypoxic zone every summer in the United States. Herbicides and pesticides are another pollutant. They can contaminate drinking water, and they harm a wide variety of organisms other than what is being targeted. Concentrated animal feeding operations support a unnaturally large population of livestock in a small area, and livestock produce a large amount of methane. However, methane is not the only greenhouse gas emitted from agriculture. Nitrous oxide and carbon are emitted as well. Habitat loss is another driver of this problem. Agriculture requires a lot of land, and in 2012, just over 40% of the United States land was farmland. Soil erosion is another indirect driver of this problem. This is a natural process. However, agriculture can negatively impact the quality of soil, making it vulnerable to erosion. Desertification can occur from improper land management techniques as well as from overgrazing of livestock. The parts of the United States that are particularly vulnerable to desertification are rangelands with annual dry seasons. Deforestation is another product of this habitat loss. Resource depletion is another driver of this problem. Agriculture accounts for 80 to 90% of water consumed in the United States, while nearly half of corn grown in 2013 was used as animal feed. At the same time, year after year of growing crops causes soil nutrient depletion and land deprivation. Antibiotics is another driver of this issue. The use of antibiotics for disease prevention is very prevalent in agriculture. In 2007, 90.1% of dairy operations provided antibiotics for disease prevention. This overuse of antibiotics creates the condition for antibiotic-resistant bacteria, while at the same time, poor living conditions indirectly drive the need for the use of antibiotics.